Tell you about the city of St. Augustine.
Oh, good.
Away we go.
Well, we got this all by ourselves.
Shaping up to be a real nice day today. You picked a good one. We're going to be heading downtown into the nation's oldest continuously occupied European settlement, the city of St. Augustine. It was a Spanish colony until 1821. The British that owned it for 21 years, and then there was actually the Confederacy, which owned the area for about four or 5 years. It was 1565 that the city was founded, so 154 years old, which in the grand scheme of human existence, not that old, but in the grand scheme of the United States, quite old indeed. It is the first colony that was permanently occupied by European settlers in the area. Don Pedro Menendez de Aviles first founded the city. September 8th, 1565, he stuck a flag in the sand and claimed this land. En el nombre de Dios y el nombre de España. In the name of God, nombre de Dios, and the name of Spain, nombre de España. Those are minor periods of our history. There are four major periods of our history. The Archaic, the Colonial, the Renaissance, and the Modern Era. The Archaic period lasting from about 2400 BC, when the first Native Americans were in the area. Or not? Away we go. Alright folks, so we are on our way to the original Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum, or as Robert Ripley called it, fascinating history to the man. He was the first cartoonist millionaire TV show. Then Robert Ripley unfortunately collapsed and passed away. 1949, he had actually been staying at this hotel on a relatively frequent basis. The hotel had opened in 1941. The building, though, was built in the 1880s. The building was built for the Warden family's winter home in the 1880s. And they abandoned it in about 1925. It sat abandoned for the next decade and a half, and then opened as the hotel in 1941. And Robert Ripley was a frequent guest at this hotel. He loved the hotel, loved everything about it. It was actually owned by a man named Norton Baskin, and it was a gift for him. After he passed away, though, that the Ripley's Entertainment Company was actually able to acquire the building, and it became the first Ripley's in 1950. All of her famous artist and author friends to hang out, and Robert Ripley was one of them. So when Norton Baskin gifted Marjorie the hotel, she opened it up and said, hey, everybody who wants to come and hang out, come on down. Original city gates would have been made of palm logs as well. These city gates were actually built after the threat had mostly passed to make sure we knew who was coming in and out of the city. In 1668, we had been attacked by Robert Searle. Robert Searle actually tricked people. He came into the city with saying that he was a merchant. He came into the city with his crew saying he was a merchant. He was allowed to stay in the city, but then right before your very eyes. There's a lot of really cool stuff going on. You've also got the Pirate and Treasure Museum here to the right-hand side, which is one of the largest collections of pirating memorabilia in the world. You can learn all about the pirates that had attacked the city, like Robert Searle. Now, the Colonial Quarter and a Colonial Experience also have city's gates. Here to the left-hand side are the city gates themselves. You can see a little bit closer. It's a roughly hewn type of stone known as coquina. You'll find coquina throughout the city of St. Augustine. We're going to pull up here. We're going to make our stop, and then we're going to continue on our way. That is St. George Street over there. The oldest building on St. George Street would be the oldest wooden schoolhouse, which was fortunately spared by that fire. It was built around us together because they had to walk everywhere. So the city was a very close-knit community. They were not trying to attack. They were not on the offense, they were on the defense. And this actually ended up helping them last in that Castillo for countless days. They would not run out of ammunition, which was kind of a big deal. We're going to fast forward a little bit here. We're going to go to the 1800s. And a man named Henry Flagler. Henry Flagler had arrived in the city of St. Augustine in 1877. His wife was terminally ill with tuberculosis, a disease of the lungs. And one of the only things that they had to treat this disease was warm, salty air. Now, they were coming down here for the winters to give a little bit of relief to his wife. If you look over to your right-hand side is a church. This is Grace United Methodist Church. Henry Flagler, coming back year after year after year, he decided that it was Church of St. Augustine. The layout of the city streets was designed in the 1560s into the 1570s. But like I said, this whole area was burnt by fire in the 1900s, 1914. The only original structures would have been made of that coquina stone. Much of it had to be restored, and much of it ended up destroyed. So a lot of these buildings are reproductions, but even still from 1914. I mean, these buildings are well over 100 years old. Now, there's a lot to see downtown, folks. A lot. And this is a great place to explore, but I will warn you, museums close earlier than shopping does. So, while it is easy to get distracted and want to go shopping downtown, if you do have museums that you specifically, there was a modicum of protection for the inner portions of the city. This was the early form of fortification. Now, once the Castillo was built, that all changed. And they started actually construction of that building over there. The Castillo de San Marcos is the oldest building in town and nearly devastated by the Battle of 1702 and the British armies. They had come into the city, attacked the city, but the entire city had actually evacuated into the Castillo. There were no civilian casualties despite that battle lasting for well over 50 days. The city ended up burnt to the ground, but the Castillo stayed intact and has been there ever since, protecting the city of St. Augustine, having never been taken by force. Alright, so as we go by, you'll be able to look up and down St. George Street. You will notice it's a little bit wider and a little bit straighter than the rest of the roads that we're driving on right now, but only ever so slightly. Because St. George Street was the main thoroughfare through town, they wanted to protect the city. These winding roads that you'll see were actually protected from cannonballs. Bullets do not go around corners, and by making the roads winding rather than straight, even though it is designed to handle something so grandiose. You see, she was actually a nurse. She was not of the same ilk as Henry Flagler, but Henry Flagler actually was not born into wealth. He was the son of a Presbyterian minister. He worked his way to what he got. So he saw the value in Ida Alice, and he married her despite the other socialites telling him not to. They kind of shunned her after that, so she wanted to prove herself and had asked Henry Flagler to build a grand hotel where they could all come down and see that she could command such a wealthy place. Well, Henry Flagler had a daughter. He was devastated, so he had this church to your right-hand side built in less than 1 year. Less than 1 year from construction to completion. Took less than a year, so about 325 days to build this church. Largest piece of hand-poured terracotta in the world. He did not spare any expense. He was incredibly wealthy. How did they acquire it? Well, Henry Flagler asked them what they had to trade, and they said, well, nothing. We'll pray for you, though. And he was like, oh. They raised the money, he donated the land, and actually ended up helping them build the church itself. Now, here on the right-hand side is Flagler Memorial Presbyterian Church. This one built out of tragedy. Again, Henry Flagler, no stranger to tragedy despite his millions of dollars, was actually quoted once as having said, I have more money than God himself, but there is one thing on this earth I could never buy, and that is more time. He knew he could not buy more time. Business was John Rockefeller. Rockefeller had funded the enterprise. Henry Flagler was the brains. Now, this company had already been split up by the time Henry Flagler was coming down here, so he was looking for a new enterprise, and St. Augustine was it. Actually, all of La Florida and the tourism industry here was what he was getting involved with. Now, the Baptists in town had heard that Henry Flagler gave the Methodists a church. This is 1800s, this is the late 1800s. $2.4 million was an astronomical amount of money. This was when the very first millionaires were being minted, so wealth before. $2.4 million on one building, no less? That was mind-blowing. Tiffany and Company. Tiffany and Company did all of the interior design of the hotel. You can actually still see the Tiffany stained glass windows and fixtures throughout the building. The stained glass windows are the largest collection of Tiffany stained glass in the world in one room. It's valued at over $40 million. This was also the third building ever to be built with electric lighting. Thomas Edison himself actually came to the city of St. Augustine to install 2 DC generators to power the over 5,000 electric light bulbs in that building. Our next stop is going to be across the street at the Via Zareta. The Via Zareta is a scaled replica of the Alhambra Palace. Now, I studied the Alhambra Palace a little bit when I was in school. I went to college for art major. I was a sculpture major in college, which is why I trained today. I learned a lot about art and architecture, though. And I will tell you, this building is one of the most beautiful. It's a really interesting building. It's something called Moorish Revival architecture, which combines all the cultures of the Mediterranean. It takes North Africa and the Middle East and adds a little bit of European flair to it. Spain was occupied by the Ottoman Empire throughout a great portion of its history. So it has a lot of Middle Eastern influence in many of the buildings and much of the culture of Spain. We're going to pull up here. We're going to make our stop. This building is amazing. It was actually built by a man named Franklin Smith, who was from Boston, Massachusetts. Now, as you look at the facade of the building, you will see those multicultural influences. It's a really interesting building. You can see the Middle Eastern and North African influences. It's actually based on the Alhambra, though. The Alhambra is much bigger than this one. This one's 1/10 the size, and it's built to scale. It's only the west wing as well. There's actually several other portions of that building in Spain, and it's an antiquities museum today. Our next stop is going to be here at the Leitner Museum. The Leitner Museum, a pretty fascinating place. The Leitner Museum, it houses the collection of Otto Leitner. Who is Otto Leitner? What did he collect? He collected collections. You see, Otto Leitner collected the collections of other collectors. Whenever a collector would collect a collection, if Otto Leitner liked the collection that that collector had been collecting, he would collect that collector's collection. He would take the collected collections that other collectors had already collected and combine them into larger collections of collected collections that other collectors had already collected. He then turned it into his museum. He called the museum the Collectors Collected Collection Museum that other collectors already collected into a larger collection of collected collections museum of collected collections that other collectors already collected. Pretty cool split spot, actually. They've got all kinds of cool stuff inside. Music, science, art, history, even a bit of mystery. It's one of the larger museums and one of the most ornate collections that you'll see in the city of St. Augustine. This is a truly unique museum. This is going to be our stop for the Leitner. Enjoy. Our next stop is going to be at the San Sebastian Winery. Yep, right through the front of the gates. You'll go through the courtyard and into the building. Enjoy it. It's absolutely beautiful. Next stop, the winery.
Imagine a hotel like that. Yeah, now like a college town.
The Court Freedom Trail. This is it over here, stop number 1. And then coming up to your left will be stop number 2, and across the street, stop number 3. There are 40 of these stops, and as you can see on the front of the sign, there's a phone number. You call the number, you type in the code, and they will give you a guided audio tour through your cell phone. Now, my favorite way to do it is get in the car. I plug the cell phone into the speakers, so you get one of those cassette decks, you pop it in with the cord, or the Bluetoothy situation, whatever you got going on in your car. You plug it into your car speakers and you drive around. You get a surround sound free guided audio tour. It's a really fantastic way to see this portion of the city. It's quite large. It's beautiful. These are known as the Painted Ladies, these homes. It is the largest collection of Victorian era homes and mansions in the entirety of the state of Florida. So there's a lot to see in Lincolnville, but we're almost done with my portion of the tour of Lincolnville. So as you can see, I don't get a lot of time to talk about it. It was founded after the Civil War. As the Civil War ended, the freed slaves needed a place to start a new life. They had no money, no education. They had nowhere to go. They had nothing. They had hours and tastings throughout the day. Highly recommend this one. A lot of people love this tour. You definitely should check it out if you have the opportunity. And don't worry if you don't drink alcohol. That's okay. They got plenty of grape juice inside as well. We're going to pull up here. We're going to make our stop. This is the San Sebastian Winery. Next stop will be at the Whetstone Chocolate Factory.
We're gonna stop here. Or
Next stop. Owner actually lived there for a short period of time. Now, one of the homes that is actually in the process of being restored is up here on the left. Listen, it's because we're getting instructions about the route. Every once in a while, don't forget, this is a active city, and there could be problems with the roadways. And we do get directions from our dispatcher. They have GPSs all 1800s. The 1800s had some of the harshest winters in Florida history. They were living freely, but they were still considered slaves. If they left that property, they would be considered runaway slaves and could be put to death. This was not an easy thing to do, to maintain a property that was not even theirs. Well, the city, after the Civil War ended, saw that these folks had built this small community, and they decided to expand the community and offer it to the rest of the families of freed slaves as well. An opportunity to live, an opportunity to start over, and an opportunity to become part of the United States of America. This is a big deal, and they finally had that little bit of freedom, and with just that's all that was needed, that little bit of freedom and a fresh start, and they were able to get build an entire city. By the 80s, we're downtown. At that time, because of segregation era laws and different is a reproduction. It is on the same footprint as the original governor's house, and today it is a museum. It was in the 1930s that it was restored. It was City Hall and the post office for a while. Today it is the Governor's House Museum, and you can go and explore that museum for free. I love a good free museum. That one is free. It's an art founded in the 1570s. So as they were building the city of St. Augustine, designing the city of St. Augustine, they built this centralized plaza. As it was in most European cities, they had a central plaza. D.C. with several of the civil rights leaders of the city of St. Augustine. And when he got to Washington, D.C., he testified in front of Congress, as did many of the civil rights leaders. And within 2 weeks, the law was changed. Alright, so as we loop the plaza, a lot of stuff to see. You've got the tallest building in St. Augustine. You've got the Cathedral Basilica, the first Catholic parish in North America, built around 1700s. But the parish was founded in 1565. You've got the Constitution Monument over there, 1813, the Hospital Street. This is where Nuestra Señora de los Remedios was right here. This was the hospital, and on the other side would have been the church. So you had the hospital here. If somebody got sick, they would go to recover at Nuestra Señora de los Remedios. Up here, you've also got the Spanish Military Hospital Museum, a more modern hospital, and the one back there. This one, oh my gosh. You got me. You got me? You got me. You just scared the bejesus out of me. This is the doctor here at the doctor here at the hospital. Excuse me. I know, but it's okay. I am not going to take your food cough right away. If you had, let's say, a splinter and your finger became infected, well, they could definitely take care of that. First of all, they remove the splinter, maybe drain the wound. If that didn't work, chop it right off. Boom, takes about 45 seconds. Just pop it off. They had a little machine that could do it. This is going to be our stop for...
Huh? Isn't it a beautiful city?
Yeah. Nice.
forever.
town away from the Spanish.
That's Ponte de
4
Leon.
foot 11 of him. He was nonetheless the tallest
Ponte de
man on his
Leon.
own ships.
Estaba en Puerto Rico.
He wouldn't accept a sailor taller than he was.
El campo
He gave
por
Florida its name,
allá.
He was in
sailing up the coast in 1493. Sorry, 1493. He observed the spring flowers and said they reminded him of the flower festivals back in Spain. Hence, La Florida, flowers.
They're now boarding Black Creek train. It's a Black Creek train. Black Creek train.
Now, St. Augustine, after whom the town is named, is sometimes referred to as Augustine of Hippo. Hippo was a town in Numidia in northern Africa where he was bishop. The location is the modern-day Algeria. If you look above the entrance to the basilica, you can see a statue of the saint set into the wall, holding his bishop's crozier. He was a philosopher saint. He was also the patron saint of brewers and printers. Philosophy was my own academic discipline, so I did a bit of a study of the man. And with your permission, I will ship the small lady and a leading army of printers to do that very thing. The locals here heard about the impending attack, and before more got here, they ensconced themselves in the newly completed fort, taking all of their worldly goods with them, including even their livestock. They had enough material to withstand a siege of 3 or 4 months. James Ball was here for just 7 weeks. Has 2 beautiful daughters. 2 beautiful daughters of hope are anger and courage. Anger at the way the world is. Secondly, in those 7 weeks he lived in the fort, no meaningful damage whatsoever. Every evening the Spanish ship came out, gathered up the cannibals, filled in the nipples, and rebaked them white. The next morning James Ball was looked through his telescope and see the fort completely unaffected by the assaults of neighbours to almost every house in town, including the oldest house. If you look through the railing here, there are 3 ground floor windows. Between the second and the third, around head height, you can see where there's still a cannonball buried in the coquina wall. Needless to say, he did not crack the wall, he just buried himself inside it. The magic of coquina wasn't just to soak it up. We had the Spanish were being reinforced in Cuba. The sail ran back to Carolina. The English of Van Temple
Why did you
must
think
have burned the
that's
town to the ground before we left. Once he's gone, the locals did what people always do in those circumstances. They came out of the fort and began to rebuild. The first house to be rebuilt was the Gonzales Alvarez house. The locals just called it the oldest house. Above it, Richard Lyons built in 1927 in Florida. you ever saw the Vincent Price movie House of Wax, it was filmed in that building. Little bit of trivia, the marble lions at the western end of the train are entitled to play 80 balls of mini golf free of charge. Right. I should say when it was rebuilt, it didn't look quite like this, because what was rebuilt was a Spanish house, which is to say it was single-story, flat roofs. The beginning of the 1700s, that described virtually every house in the house. Now, it's 50 odd years later, the English had this town for 21 years. Not as a result of military conquest, but by signing a thing called the Treaty of Paris. Basically, we swapped Havana and Cuba. 18 steps up to the top. One step at the bottom if you pull off the top. In the summer, they take kiddies out on the very own pirate. These are the virtues of glass and meal mutton. Now, throughout the 1702 attack, James Moore was encamped over there on Appletania Island, facing the fort. All of his cannons pointed toward the fort. This, I'm afraid, is my least favourite moment of the tour. Simply because I'm an Englishman. At this point, I have to admit that a fellow Englishman, James Moore, did something even nastier than throwing the detail on the ground.
That's it.
San Marcos. Decimated. Everything was still made of wood by that time, so it was all burned down by the raiding and marauding pirates and the British. They both had the same result, total destruction, but for different motives. The British one, whether you feel younger or not, is up to you. It's up to you. It's not the years in your life, it's the life in your years. So what I do is my wife's about 9 years younger than me, and when we come here, I drink from the fountain, I give her a hug and a kiss, and then I can honestly say I felt younger after drinking from the fountain of youth. But it's a lot of fun. There's nature trails. They shoot a live cannon off back by the fountain every hour. There's a pier, there's a watchtower, there's a nature trail, there's all kinds of fun stuff all over Fountain of Youth. But they deposited a lot of it here to pay the soldiers. Our next mission is to bypass it, unless somebody wants to step off. I don't see any hands up, so